There's a place where the river runs wild, the pine trees whisper secrets, and the mountains rise like silent sentinels around a fortress of solitude. It's not just any ranch. It's his ranch. Hidden deep in Montana, this is where Hank Williams Jr. escaped the world and rewrote his legend. Today, we're pulling back the heavy wooden doors of that rustic kingdom, stepping inside the life, the fortune, and the outlaw soul of a country music rebel. Are you ready to ride? He was born with a name too heavy to carry. Randall Hank Williams, the only son of country music's most haunted legend. From the moment he opened his eyes in Shreveport, Louisiana, the world expected him to become someone he never got the chance to know. His father. They called him Bossiphus, a nickname his father gave him after a ventriloquist dummy. But the stage? It called him by his last name. By age 8, he was already up there, singing Hank Sr.'s ballads in auditoriums packed with nostalgia. His guitar was too big for his shoulders, but the weight of legacy, that fit him perfectly. Too perfectly. But what happens when the applause starts to feel like a chain? All through his teens, Hank Jr. walked a tightrope between tribute and self-erasure. He was praised for sounding like his father, celebrated for channeling the same sorrowful twang. But inside, he was drowning in someone else's shadow. He could have stayed that way, a permanent impersonator, preserved in amber. But then, something broke. And breaking, it turned into fire. In the early 1970s, he began to rebel. Gone were the suits and sad songs. In came the raw guitars, the southern rock grit, the whiskey-laced growl. He jammed with Toy Caldwell, shared stages with Waylon Jennings, and stepped into a sound that was dirtier, grittier, and undeniably his. And then, fate pushed him to the edge. August 1975. Ajax Peak, Montana. He wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing silence, nature, peace. But on that mountain, peace turned into peril. A misstep, a fall. Nearly 500 feet through snow, ice, and jagged rock. His skull was shattered, his face unrecognizable. For 2 years, the world didn't hear much from Hank Williams Jr., but he didn't vanish. He was rebuilding. With every reconstructive surgery came a choice, not to return as a copy of his father, but as the raw, scarred, unfiltered man he had become. He grew a beard, donned dark glasses, wore a cowboy hat pulled low, not for fashion, but because it hid the physical pain, and revealed a new persona. When he returned, he didn't just bring music. He brought a movement. In the 1980s, the charts bent to his will. Family tradition, whiskey bent and hell-bound, Born to Boogie. These weren't just country hits. They were anthems for every Southern boy who ever felt misunderstood. And when his voice poured out through Monday Night Football, backed by roaring guitars and unapologetic swagger, a new generation met Hank not as Junior, but as the outlaw king. His fortune grew. So did his fire. And somewhere along the way, when the stages dimmed and the whiskey ran out, he looked west, toward Montana, to the land that once tried to end him, and would now, somehow, become his salvation. Ranch in Montana. How do you return to the place that almost killed you and dare to call it home? For Hank Williams Jr., Montana wasn't just the site of a near-fatal accident. It was the place where he shed his past and stepped fully into himself. Years after the fall from Ajax Peak, he came back, not in fear, not in defeat, but to claim it. On the banks of a winding river, tucked beneath a canopy of pine and hardwood, Hank built his retreat, part fortress, part sanctuary, and all Hank. At first glance, the lodge looks like something out of a Western daydream. Rustic cypress logs hold up a cathedral-like ceiling. A stone fireplace towers in the living room, its flames once warming boots soaked in river water and ash from bonfire nights. The floors are wide planked pine, the color of aged honey, worn by the boots of outlaws, musicians, and ghosts alike. Inside, 4,100 square feet of living space unfolds like a memory. Spacious, lived in, but purposeful. 3 bedrooms, each with windows that don't just open to fresh air, they open to silence, to stillness, to the sound of the river breathing. The master suite has its own story. Facing the river, it's where Hank often sat with a guitar in his lap and the curtains wide open. The Montana light filtered through pine trees, dancing across the wood walls. More than a bedroom. It's a writing room, a remembering room, a room where pain turned to poetry. Step into the kitchen and you'll see stainless steel appliances, but they don't distract from the hand-carved cabinetry and stone counters. It's a kitchen that's fed more than one rowdy jam session, where pots of chili simmered while guitars traded licks into the night. The dining room, warmed by a second fireplace, once hosted Thanksgiving dinners, where family filled every seat and dogs curled up beneath boots. And above it all, a loft that overlooks the great room. Not just for guests, for solitude. But what makes this place his isn't inside. It's what waits beyond the walls. Over 20 acres of pasture, fenced for horses, open for wandering. There's a massive workshop, a greenhouse that sprouts tomatoes in spring, and barns that echo with the sound of hooves and distant harmonicas. And then, the river. A full 1.2 miles of private access along one of Montana's most pristine waterways. People come here for fly fishing. Hank came here for something else. Peace. The water that once ran below his fallen body now glides past his porch. There's a symmetry to it, a forgiveness. Like Montana finally said, "You made it, son." Sometimes you build a house because you need shelter. Sometimes you build one because your soul needs a second chance. And this ranch, it's not just a home, it's a resurrection. Estate in Tennessee. If the Montana ranch is Hank's place to disappear, then his Tennessee estate is where he plants his boots in tradition. Deep in the southern countryside of Springville, Tennessee, stands a property that whispers a different kind of story. Not of reinvention, but of roots, of American heritage. A stately 11,566 square foot plantation-style mansion sits on nearly 34 acres of rolling land. But don't expect velvet ropes or polished marble. This is Hank's second home, and it's built for living. The driveway curves through thickets of trees, past old fencing and patches of wildflowers, until it opens up to the grand facade. Tall, white columns, a double front porch, and windows that seem to wink beneath the southern sun. Inside, the charm is immediate and unapologetically masculine. The floors? Cherry-stained hickory, worn in all the right places. The cabinets? Custom-crafted cherry wood. The doors? Solid oak, heavy like history. And the beams? They're not just decoration. Those 200-year-old Douglas firs were salvaged and restored. Silent giants that now hold up the ceiling of the great room, just like they once stood tall in ancient forests. But here's the part that makes every visitor pause. The private gym. A full 6,000 square feet of iron, mirrors, and space to move. With its own private bathroom, the space was designed not just for fitness, but for solitude, for discipline, for clearing the mind as much as the body. Out back, a screened-in porch wraps around the house like an old friend. It's where cigars are smoked, stories are told, and thunderstorms are watched roll in across the Tennessee sky. And then, there's the saltwater pool. Smooth, quiet, glimmering in the heat. A place to cool off after long days on horseback or with a rifle in hand. Speaking of rifles, this isn't just a country estate, it's a hunter's dream. There's a 2-acre duck pond, a generator backup system, a workshop for gear and repairs, and wildlife, plenty of it. Deer graze the edges of the property. Birds roost near the trees. It's not uncommon for Hank to step outside and lose hours just walking the perimeter with a dog and a shotgun. This land is alive. It's music without lyrics. A song played on leaves rustling, water rippling, and boots pressing down on dew-covered grass. Tennessee is where his father sang. Montana is where Hank found himself. But here, in Springville, it's where he slows down, where old values still matter, where the man behind the music becomes just another soul watching the sun sink low behind the trees. You don't earn $45 million by accident, especially not in a world where legacies cast long, merciless shadows. For Hank Williams Jr., every dollar earned wasn't just currency. It was independence. The moment he stepped out from under his father's name, he stopped chasing expectations and started chasing truth. And truth, it sells. His breakthrough came in 1975 with Hank Williams Jr. and Friends. It wasn't just an album. It was a declaration of identity. That record opened floodgates. Over the next 2 decades, he released album after album, Family Tradition, Whiskey Bent and Hellbound, Rowdy, and more. They didn't just climb charts. They carved his name into the mountain of country music royalty. But the money didn't just come from vinyl and cassette tapes. In 1989, ESPN approached Hank Jr. with a proposal that would change everything. Turn his rowdy anthem into the intro for Monday Night Football. And just like that, All My Rowdy Friends Are Here on Monday Night was born. Every week, millions of Americans heard Hank's voice thunder through their televisions. And behind that voice, licensing fees, royalties, branding. It became one of the most iconic theme songs in American sports television, and one of the most lucrative. Then came merchandise, tour sales, publishing rights, collaborations, and tribute projects, like the hauntingly brilliant There's a Tear in My Beer, a digitally created duet with his late father. It wasn't just a song, it was a moment, one that paid homage, and paid well. Even when his presence on the charts slowed, the checks didn't. Catalog royalties rolled in. Vinyl made a comeback. And in 2020, when Hank was finally inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, the industry wasn't just honoring his voice, it was solidifying his position as a brand, a legend, and a legacy builder. So what does $45 million mean to a man like Hank? It means ranches in Montana. It means freedom to hunt, to fish, to disappear when the noise gets too loud. It means he never had to conform. And more than anything, it means he did it his own way. Philanthropy. He never shouted it from rooftops, never posed with giant donation checks. And yet, behind the beard, the shades, and the bulletproof swagger, Hank Williams Jr. has always had a quiet instinct for giving. For him, it wasn't about reputation. It was about remembrance. In 2020, when his daughter Catherine tragically lost her life in a car accident, the pain was unimaginable. But Hank didn't just mourn privately. He turned grief into grace. In her memory, he supported foundations centered on youth safety, mental health, and family wellness. Not with loud headlines, but with real action. Contributions that made a difference where it mattered most. But his giving heart didn't begin there. For years, Hank has quietly donated to music education programs in rural schools, helping young kids discover instruments they otherwise couldn't afford. It's a full-circle moment, because once upon a time, it was music that gave him a way out. He's also backed causes supporting American veterans, those who, like him, carry the scars of battles both seen and unseen. Whether through private funding, benefit concerts, or simply showing up, Hank never forgot the price of freedom. And in the aftermath of hurricanes and tornadoes that tore through the South, Hank sent resources before news crews even arrived. Trucks, generators, supplies. Because to him, charity isn't a campaign. It's a calling. A few close friends say he's been known to cut anonymous checks for struggling musicians, especially those in Nashville trying to catch their first break. He sees himself in them, not as a superstar, but as a survivor. It all stems from something deeply Southern, deeply spiritual, and deeply Hank. You help where you can. You love who you can. And you never ask for applause. In a world that often mistakes loudness for compassion, Hank Williams Jr. proves the opposite. That sometimes the most powerful generosity rides in silence. Behind every outlaw song is a man who knows what it means to lose. And behind every million-dollar ranch, every #1 hit, every rebel yell, there's a father, a husband, a soul who's known heartbreak deeper than any lyric could express. For Hank Williams Jr., family was never just background noise. It was the melody underneath everything. Personal life. He has 5 children, 4 still living. Each one, in their own way, carries a fragment of Hank's wild spirit. Holly Williams, a soulful singer-songwriter, writes ballads as tender as they are timeless. Her music feels like a whispered letter, personal, introspective, and achingly real. Hillary Williams, another daughter, has fought her own battle. After a near-fatal car crash in 2006, she spent months in recovery. But like her father, she didn't stay broken. She came back, stronger, softer, and more focused than ever on her music and memoirs. Samuel Williams, the youngest, often described as the quiet one, has slowly stepped into the spotlight with a voice that echoes his grandfather's, but with a modern twist. There's restraint in his singing, a kind of reflection that feels earned, not borrowed. And then there's Shelton Hank Williams, known to the world as Hank III. A whirlwind of punk, country, and chaos. Hank III is as rebellious as his father once was, and maybe even more so. Their relationship, by all accounts, is complex, filled with love, tension, understanding, and distance. But that's the Williams way. They don't wear their emotions on their sleeves. They let them bleed into the music. And yet, even for a man who has survived so much, fame, near death, pressure, and addiction, nothing could have prepared Hank for 2020. That year, his daughter Catherine Williams Dunning, just 27 years old, was killed in a tragic car accident in Tennessee. She wasn't just his child. She was light, laughter, and grounding. A young mother, a heart too full for this world. And when she left, something inside Hank shifted again. He went quiet. No press statements, no long tributes, just stillness. Friends say he retreated deeper into his Montana ranch, fishing alone, riding horses before the sun rose, sitting in silence by the fireplace, old records crackling in the background. Because grief doesn't always cry out. Sometimes it just breathes. But Hank's never been one to run from pain. He lives with it, learns from it, and lets it shape him. These days, his life is quieter, deliberately so. He spends mornings walking along the river, coffee in hand. He tends to his horses, plays guitar not for crowds, but for the trees and the wind. Some evenings he'll pour a whiskey, sit on his porch in Tennessee, and watch the ducks gather around the pond. No interviews, no arena lights, just peace, real peace. The kind you only find after you've lost things you can never replace. And while he may never fully heal from Catherine's absence, he honors her in the simplest way possible. By being present, with his kids, his grandchildren, his land, his songs. He doesn't chase anything anymore. Not fame, not charts, not validation. He's already built his kingdom. And now, he just wants to live in it. Not every legend needs a throne. Some just need a river, a rifle, a worn guitar, and a place to breathe. Hank Williams Jr. was never meant to be a replica. Not of his father, not of any mold. He was born into a legacy too heavy for most, yet somehow he made it his own, scratched out, scarred up, and sealed with truth. The Montana Ranch, with its vast forests and quiet riverbanks, tells us more about Hank than any platinum record could. It's not polished, it's not loud, but it endures, just like him. And then there's Tennessee, where the roots run deep and the air smells like memory. A home built not just with money, but with soul, with grief, with grace, with the kind of stillness that only comes after you've walked through storms and chosen peace over noise. For every rebel who ever felt misunderstood, for every son who had to fight to be seen on his own terms, for every man who found clarity in the quiet, Hank Williams Jr. is more than a country star. He's proof that survival can be beautiful, that scars can become stories, and that even the loudest lives sometimes end in a whisper under a big Montana sky. If this story stirred something in you, if you felt the wind in those pines, or heard the echo of a rebel heart in the stillness, then don't just scroll on. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear a story of redemption and realness, and subscribe for more journeys inside the homes and the souls of icons like Hank. Because some homes are made of wood and stone, and some are built from fire, fight, and a whole lot of country soul.